It's a great honor to be in Egypt with all of you to talk about a topic that I think is truly transformational, not just to the world, but in particular to Egypt. Let me get my slide there. So it's fantastic for me to have an opportunity to share a little bit with you about the vision around the journey to the cloud. And I call it a journey because I don't think that the cloud is going to happen overnight. Like many technologies, we can fall deeply interested in it, but it takes time for innovation and transformation to take root. We've seen the age of the internet, a broadband technology, which Your Excellency spoke around, and now we're seeing this new innovation called the cloud. You know, I spend my time running public sector at Microsoft, talking with governments around the world, and understanding that there are major challenges for many governments. Some of them are socioeconomic, some of them are around war, many of them around the future for children and education. Lots of times it's around healthcare. I spent a day in Denmark talking about the future of health for the elderly because the issues in Denmark are quite different from Egypt. Egypt, the issues are more about youth, with 35% of youth under the age of 16. But in these ages of complex challenges, I believe some of the biggest opportunities come with innovation and using technology. And Egypt is one of those countries who's really harnessed innovation and technology for very positive change. And I believe that cloud computing offers a new opportunity not just to save money, but to look fundamentally at doing things differently and to use the technology in a secure and in a very productive way. So when I look at the large transformational technologies, you know, we've seen the age of many of our mobile devices with smartphones and over a billion smartphones around the world. If you go to a country like India, you may find that people aren't wearing shoes, but they're carrying a smartphone. We see that the number of tweets, I think that all of us are doing, and many of our children are tweeting, have grown exponentially, now over 2.8 billion tweets a week. And the data that we're generating is enormous. It's 35 zettabytes, which is really incredible. You know, I was looking and thinking about where all the wealth of information came from around the world. And in the 3rd century BC, it was believed that all of the human information in the world was contained in the Alexandria Library. But if we look now to how much information is being created through digitization, it's really enormous to think that for all of that information in the Alexandria Library, that there are 320 times as much information from every person around the world. That's 1,200 exabytes. If you stack that up in terms of CDs, it'd be 5 stacks of CDs to reach the moon. So when you think of the age of information and technology and what we have to harness and empower, it's really astronomical in terms of the transformation that we're all seeing in technology and how we're using technology differently in our lives. You know, we like to think in corporations that at the enterprise level, that's where all the technology is. But I think we've seen through these trends that we really have this almost collision of the enterprise and the corporate information with citizen information. And governments around the world are looking to see how they can change that and use the information differently. And I think cloud computing is going to be that next wave of technology, offering a new wave of productivity that will create opportunities that we can't even imagine yet. When I think about the how, the who, the what, and the where, I think about these technology trends. When we think about the how are we getting our lives done, our work done? How are governments running? It's very much through mobile technology. When I met with the head of Paris 2 weeks ago, she said, you know, Laura, I've got to look at my new infrastructure and the kinds of technology I'm going to use. And I know it's not all going to be on the desktop because you know what? Most of my workers are mobile, and I need a new generation of technology that's going to harness the power of information to make my workers more productive. I've got to cut costs, but it's not just about cost savings. It's about doing work differently. It's about motivating workers differently. It's about teachers using technology differently as well. And so mobility is one of the ways that I think we're transforming and really embracing the internet age. That's the what. Mobility is all making this happen. On the other hand, we have social technology. And social technology is sometimes a scary thing for governments, but also one that many countries are saying, social technology allows me to work with my citizens differently, Many governments around the world, New Zealand was one of the last countries I talked to about this, are using technology for one-stop shopping. And being more social means that they have the eyes and ears of every citizen of what's important to the country. Yes, oftentimes putting pressure on governments, and certainly Egypt is a country that when adopting social networking, we saw it took 40 years for the Berlin Wall to fall down. It took 2 weeks and 3 days for a change of government here. So social technology can be a very powerful force politically. It can also be something that helps us in areas like sustainability. When you look at the environmental impact, we had a technology called Eye on Earth with a partner that allowed individuals to look and say, what are the environmental issues? There's a power outage here, there's a leak in a water main, that we use technology to have an impact on things like sustainability. And that's a really powerful force as well. When you think about big data, you think, wow, all those stacks of CDs that went to the moon, we're harnessing all that big data in different ways. I think the challenge is we have a lot of that data, we haven't quite figured out what to do with it. So it's not really the digitization that's most important, but in the future it's going to be around datafication. And datafication is different from digitization. It's around new forms of technology, new forms of information that we haven't harnessed yet. If you think about it, it's about locational information that's not digital, it's a different kind of information. It's about understanding information that comes up in new forms of healthcare or new search technologies that enable information to become data. So datafication is really the trend that we see in big data that's changing. But if it weren't for the cloud is really going to enable all of this in new ways. And I think we're just learning, whether it's in the private sector, with governments, with other institutions, how to harness the how in mobility, the who with social, the what with big data, and to enable that with what, the cloud. You know, lots of times meeting with governments and understanding the challenges, some governments have had austerity and budget cuts. I call austerity the daily diet. It seems like every government has to say, how do I do more with less, and then also new with less? But governments are having to understand how do they deliver the same priorities differently. And cloud is really one of those evolutions that offers new ways of using technology to do things differently. When you think of cloud, and lots of people will say, Laura, what is the cloud? Cloud is really the ability to use hardware and software that's remote through a network to make it more accessible, to virtualize, go beyond virtualization, but to use those resources, server technology, et cetera, in a more consolidated way, to harness that differently in many different varieties. But governments are looking to say, how do we use the cloud technology to be more productive and save money? But it's not just about saving money, it's about innovating for new opportunities. It's also about providing better services for citizens. And that's where I think in cloud technology, you can offer services, whether that's in education or healthcare in new ways. We also think about cloud really as that transformation going from mainframe technology to client server to new opportunities. It's a fantastic way to think about sustainability in the environment because you're lowering emissions by having less technology infrastructure and virtualizing it. You're lowering the use of energy, and I think many countries are using that as a strategic lever in terms of meeting their environmental impact. If you look at China, if you look at Brazil and others, they're looking at sustainability and environmental impact as one of the areas to harness. And then obviously it's about innovation. And if you go to China, which I'm going to make a trip there tonight, unfortunately, not staying in this country another day, but if you go to China, they've already, in the last year, up till 2012, they've created $88 billion of market opportunity through innovations in the cloud. China actually has a textile cloud. By 2013, they'll have about $165 billion of market opportunity. When I look at that, Your Excellency, I think Egypt has a fantastic opportunity with youth, with technology, with innovation, with a great academic, to think about how many jobs can be created and what innovations can take place if Egypt harnesses the power of cloud and really makes things happen, really the center of gravity for the future of cloud. It is about job creation. In this recent study by IDC, by 2015, there will be 7 million cloud jobs. All of the new jobs that are being tracked in the future in information technology are around the cloud. And so when you think about it, I'd like to see the EMEA and specifically Egypt really on the map. I think there's a huge opportunity to say those jobs in the future, they're 2.7 million today, but many of those jobs can be created in Egypt, not just for Egypt, but for the whole Middle East, for Africa, for the region as a powerful economic force in terms of creation of the future and productivity and new economic gains. When you think of reinvention, I think this is one of the best ways that entire countries are going to reinvent themselves around costs, because it is that enormous cost savings, but it's not just about doing more with less, it's about doing the new in education, new in transportation, new in healthcare, new in government, new ways to connect with citizens, to optimize services, to create both sustainability and safety and security. You know, I like to talk about some of the case studies, and we happened to have a CEO summit at Microsoft last week. One of the heads of the National Security Agency was there. We do quite a bit of work with law agencies around the world and intelligence agencies around the world. And I just looked at this cost savings in a case study we did with the NSA. They predict, and I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but they have cost savings in terms of infrastructure, in terms of jobs, in terms of emissions reductions. For the whole Department of Defense, they estimate that cloud technology can provide about a 30% cost savings all up in terms of what that's going to do. But I don't just think about, again, you know, how you're going to do more of the same. It's really about how you also do new. We worked after 9/11 with New York City quite a bit, using technology to say, how do we transform public safety, make things more safe for the city, to increase tourism. It's a challenge for many countries that go through disruptions, whether those are man-made or they're by nature and by force, the recent hurricane as well. Looking at this, what we did, and this is a picture of Mayor Bloomberg and the head of the New York Police Department, we created a technology called a domain awareness system that used real-time data, video, and criminal records, so really crunching together historical data and real-time data to provide a solution called situational awareness, which allows the New York Police Department to help create a safer city. But what was really interesting about this is that they're doing something new with public safety, and they're providing a new technology with their own intellectual property. And with the partner, we built out a software technology that every time that technology gets purchased, it creates a revenue stream for the city. So it's a way for the city to monetize this incredible wealth of knowledge and information that they have in intellectual property. So I think it's a great example of thinking out of the box. I know, Minister, you're thinking of that quite a bit, about thinking out of the box, about the value of the intellectual property in Egypt and in all of the cities to create new technologies, new software capabilities, new capabilities in education and health and public safety, and find a way to monetize those, to provide that knowledge, provide those technologies to other countries and cities that may be able to use it as well. So this, is a powerful example of not just doing more, but doing new with less. This is what governments are looking to do as they have to cut costs and create new opportunities for citizens and provide economic growth. So when you also think about cloud, most people think, well, there's a public cloud, which is a really scary place, and there's a private cloud. I feel really secure with the private cloud. And I will tell you, working with governments around the world, governments are playing it smart. Governments are investing in private cloud to understand and learn about data governance and information and content and how they want to run cloud. And it gives them a lot of opportunity to do things differently in a secure way across their ministries, across their government agencies, and to then to understand what are the types of opportunities that can put in a public cloud. Public clouds are scalable and agile. They're sometimes less secure, but I think the power of a public cloud in the future, and for example, we put, with Office 365, we put all of that as a service in the cloud to our customers, is the ability to say, I can save a lot of money. Those aren't my crown jewels. I can access that standard type of technology information, and I can use those other monies to make the cloud that I really need to be secure more secure. So I think what we'll see over time is that most governments, I think the vision here is the private cloud to make sure it's safe and secure. But then over time, what can I migrate in terms of workloads into a public cloud? Really creating the power of a hybrid cloud. We work with customers around the world because at Microsoft, we have both the public cloud capabilities through our Azure technology. We work with many customers with the most secure capabilities around private cloud. And then we give opportunities for our customers to understand what type of a hybrid cloud is most important to us. How do we evolve the model of the cloud over time, giving them agility, security, and cost savings on top of that. So we started at Microsoft talking about this concept of a national cloud. And you think, well, national cloud should be all about an architecture. It should be about, those deep technologies that are going to run the cloud. But when I think about a national cloud, I think about what are going to be the priorities around the government? What are the national priorities around education and health and economic growth and taking care of people with disabilities. And I think you can think about the technology architecture, but at the end of the day, you need to think about all of the other governance and process that are going to be important, which is why I think being having a phased-in approach around the cloud to think about what that national cloud evolution will look like is very important. And I know in Egypt, empowering youth and education is very important. And I wanted to congratulate you, Minister, for signing the Millennium, which is about the transformation of education and providing a digital future, not just about one device per child, but about what content and curriculum, how do you bring the teachers on board. And at Microsoft, we're very proud because we'll have a phase-in approach for 8 million students to have access to a public cloud, to Office 365 for free, and 1 million teachers at the front end to do that as well. And I think scaling education is really about having resources in the public cloud, understanding what you need to have in the private cloud as well. And I think that's going to be one of the most powerful things in terms of empowering youth in the future. It's about an educational opportunity equal for everyone, whether you're in a city or in a rural location. And internet technology, broadband, and now cloud is going to enable entire countries to do that. It's also about the job skills as well. But the other thing we spent a lot of time thinking about in terms of what a national cloud looks like, which is really the biggest instantiation of cloud in a country, is around the regulatory issues that are important, around data privacy and security. And I think getting the rules of the road in technology, whether it's in cloud or anything else, is really important. There are many countries and areas that have already put the laws and regulations together, and it's one thing where I think all of us at an industry level working with government need to take a responsibility to understand what are the security and privacy issues that are going to be important in the cloud. There's the EU Model Clause, there are HIPAA regulations for healthcare, but getting those rules and structure right is really important. And I think cloud then offers an opportunity to address major societal changes, whether that's in the digital divide, whether it's healthcare access in a sustainable and scalable way, making technology available, using the cloud is going to optimize and economize the way that you do that as well. And then giving more accessibility to everyone around technology, in particular for people with disabilities. But getting back to security, I was looking at some recent data. Over the last 5 years, 1 billion people have been impacted by data theft. 60% of that's in hacking. And I think one thing we have to think about is how do we address these major challenges when it comes to cybersecurity and security in the cloud? I don't think it's going to be a technology problem. I think we have some of the best firewalls, authentication, systems, process to address security. But if there's one thing that I actually heard last week from Bill Gates and from Craig Mundy, our former CTO, and many of the customers who we're meeting with is they believe the most important thing around cybersecurity is going to be around collaboration, around public-private partnerships. In most countries, over 80% of the critical infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector. And I think collaboration is one of the most important things that we do as an industry to create partnerships to understand where the threats are coming from. If it's a denial of service attack, if it's a network issue, if it's something very nefarious in terms of what's happening with cybersecurity. It's one of the top issues on minds of every government around the world, every CEO in the world as well. So I think we have to get innovative and get ahead of the threats when it comes to security. It's about having a new level of training. It's about putting curricula in the universities around information security and privacy and cyber and being ahead of the game. We're never going to get rid of these attacks, but I think we've got to innovate our way out. And the biggest thing that we can do is share more information, to be collaborative, to understand where the threats of the future are going to come from, to have these interagency best practices. Several months ago, I met with the Norwegian government, their intelligence agency, their defense department, and we talked about all the technology, but at the end of the day, they said, you know what, Laura, we have to work differently because traditionally, the military and the police and the intelligence organizations, we don't all talk to each other. And when you think about it, unleashing the cloud and having a private cloud, a very secure cloud, for different agencies that deal with cyber threats and deal with security issues is going to be one of the transformational opportunities in the future to address the key issues around security in the cloud. This is just a little picture that I put together around innovation in cities. Around the world, they say by 2050, 70% of the world's population will be urbanized. It's not the goal of every country. In China, their goal is 80% by 2050. But in India, they're looking to preserve the culture of the villages and to have rural opportunities. But $350 trillion are going to be spent over the next 30 years on cities. I was just in Italy meeting with the head of digital. They're spending $1.3 billion on cities because everyone recognizes as urbanization happens, we're going to have more demands on citizens. our infrastructure is decaying, our infrastructure needs to be renewed. I can impact using technology the future of cities, whether it's in transportation, in energy, in healthcare, and government administration. So I think Microsoft is one of the companies that's really focused on how do you innovate in cities, and then how are you going to use cloud as a platform for services and citizen services, using social and mobility and big data and everything that we talked about. So I think when you think about cloud, the evolution of cloud is really going to happen around what happens in cities, in these communities, with governments, and the future of cities. That's really what's driving economic growth. Using a cloud, and maybe sometimes using part of a cloud in a hybrid, a public cloud, for small, medium business. A very innovative approach that Slovenia is looking at is Slovenia Post is looking to build a cloud across all the agencies, but then to unleash part of that into the public to spur small, medium business, to create new jobs, to create economic growth. So it's really a way to optimize the infrastructure the government will invest in private, to also have a hybrid cloud, so some of the content could be public, and then to use that for economic growth of small, medium business. I think many cities are trying to figure out what's my cloud strategy in addition to how do I use information technology to be more sustainable, to have better transportation, to reduce my emissions, to provide new healthcare opportunities, to be a safer city as well. So when I think about cloud, I think this is one of the best types of technology to increase sustainability of a nation. And I'm not just talking about energy, but sustainability in terms of political sustainability, sustainability of our education system, of healthcare, of how entire countries operate, to create new ways of economic growth. I talked about China. We see what's happening in the US. We see what's happening right here in the Middle East as well. So I think this will be one of the next big drivers for productivity and the future jobs. All of those new jobs are going to be created in the cloud, and I think what better place than Egypt to be building the future through the cloud. You know, I found this quote and I thought, there's a very powerful river in Egypt. It's the Nile. It's 4,187 miles long, and I think that river is constantly changing. And in Egypt, every time we step in that river, life seems to be changing. Every time we step into the river of technology, there's more opportunities. And I think the river that runs through Egypt is the power of technology, and I believe cloud is going to be one of the best optimizers to create the future for youth and the country. Thank you so much. Shukran.